Many individuals and groups throughout history have used the Bible to justify the suppression, exploitation, and marginalization of various individuals and groups. Today, right-wing evangelicals are continuing in this tradition, promoting white supremacy, white power, and white privilege.
Welcome to the Empowerment Zone with Ramona Houston, where we zone in on Black and Brown relations and our journey to empowering our communities.
Today, I have an absolutely engaging conversation with best-selling author and biblical scholar Dr. Obery Hendricks. We discuss his most recent book, Christians Against Christianity: How Right-Wing Evangelicals Are Destroying Our Nation and Our Faith. If you are interested in learning more about biblical text and exploring how right-wing evangelicals have misinterpreted and misused these texts to secure power, then you will definitely be enlightened by my conversation with Dr. Hendricks. For more information about Dr. Obery Hendricks and how to purchase this timely book, make sure you see the show notes. As always, please subscribe to the Empowerment Zone podcast and give us a rating on Apple Podcast. Your support will ensure that we continue our journey in empowerment and impact. Today, we have a special treat on the Empowerment Zone. We have one of America's great biblical scholars with us today, Dr. Obery Hendricks Jr. He is author of Christians Against Christianity: How Right-Wing Evangelicals Are Destroying Our Nation and Our Faith. And what a timely topic to discuss these days, considering all that is going on in our country. So welcome, Dr. Hendricks, to the Empowerment Zone.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here with you.
I'm really excited about featuring your book. I love reading it, and it's so much to learn from it. You know, there are so many discussions going on now, especially with us being in the political season, and we're seeing the influence of right-wing evangelicals and the type of, to say it bluntly, vitriol that they are spreading in our country. I really think this is a good book to have at this moment, and to really look at that history to understand that this movement didn't just evolve out of nowhere, and that it didn't just come to us, that there's a long history of the development of this movement. But also, really, the other reason I really like it is it gives us a better understanding of our own faith and how we use our faith to either make the world better or make it worse. And so I'm glad to have you today, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation very much. Been looking forward to this.
So before we get started on the book, can you tell me and our audience a little bit about yourself and your background and how you even got to studying, religion and theology?
It's a long, it was circuitous route. I was born in Farmville, Virginia, where in Prince Edward County, where they closed the schools rather than desegregate them. So in a way, you can say I was born in struggle, and family moved north to Newark, and then later to East Orange. But I joined, in my youth, I joined the Black nationalist movement under Mary Baraka in Newark, and I spent my formative years as a Black nationalist street soldier. And of course, we wanted nothing to do with the church. We thought the church was counter-revolutionary, even though I was raised in the Baptist church from a very devout family. In the movement, I rejected it. It's a long story, but somehow I ended up on Wall Street. And,
no, from the movement to Wall Street, come on.
Well, in a nutshell, I was raised in my generation. I was raised to be a credit to the race. And my parents had inculcated in me from the beginning that I'd be a white collar professional And I mean, they really had their hopes on that. And you know, they wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. Well, the doctor was out of out of it because I wasn't good in science, and I just wasn't that serious a student. And law school was just it just seemed too many words for me. So Wall Street was wide open in those days, very different than, you could get away with a lot. And we're talking about the mid 70s. And, I saw a chance to make some money and have some fun and all that. And the reason I left the nationalist movement, there are reasons for it. I'm not going to go into it, but let's just say there were some disappointments.
Mm-hmm.
That's what pushed me over the line.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for, oh God, almost a decade, I guess 8 years. I realized, it was just Wall Street does terrible things to you, spiritually. But when I was 33, my father died, and I was in the pulpit giving remarks at his funeral, and I looked out over the people, and something said to me, "This is your site of struggle, your site of service." And so I came back to the church kicking and screaming. But I hate to say it, but my mantra at the time was, well, we can't leave the church, we can't abandon our people to the preachers. And so we in the Black church, if you have a calling, way we interpret it, as it says you got a call to preach. We don't think about any other kind of callings, to serve in the legal realm or anything like that. So I'm like, oh man, I do not want to be no chicken bone. The way that I'm like, Lord, and I was kicking and screaming. I ran into a buddy of mine in the library one day, and this brother had a pile of books a foot high. And I'm looking at them; they're all on the Bible and theology and stuff. So, what are you doing, man? Because I knew him from the set, on the jazz set. And he said, "Well, man, I'm getting ready to go to Princeton Theological Seminary." I said, "Oh, brother, really?" I said, well, "Man, that's interesting because it in the nationalist movement had given us real deep intellectual concerns." That's one thing I was saying. I mean,
Yep.
Baraka had us reading the Tao Te King, of course, Fanon and African intellectuals and all that. So I said, well, man, Princeton Seminary sounds interesting. I'm saying, I know that I feel this calling in the church. So I said, well, maybe I can go if you're going. So I applied, and Brother Michael Livingston was the missions officer. He let me in. I was like a month, it was a month over the deadline, but he let me in anyway. So I'm in seminary, and I'm like still angry because I'm saying, man, I do not want to be a preacher. But then a Black professor, a young Black woman, Clarice Martin, said, you have gifts of scholarship. You should do a doctorate. Do a doctorate. I barely graduated from high school. She said, no, you have gifts of scholarship. She argued and fought with me. And so I walked, some buddies of mine, Michael Dyson, A.G. Miller, were at Princeton University Religion Department. They told me to come over and interview. And I'm like, man, I cannot get in no Princeton University. I'm not, I got more street in me than academia. But the guy ended up being my advisor, had been a freedom writer and had done time in parchment, white man, wonderful man named John Gager. And bottom line is, I said, well, damn, I guess I'm supposed to be here. I had no idea it was the hardest department to get into, the religion department to get into. I know I wouldn't have tried. So that's it in a nutshell. So, the way was open for me. And so I have a responsibility, to do what I feel, deeply called to do, which is to try to raise our people's consciousness against the low level consciousness that average church and churchianity itself gives them.
Incredible story. It's amazing how all of us have our own personal evolutions to get us where we're supposed to be. You could not be the scholar you are without having been in the nationalist movement, right? And it
helped me understand what discipleship is, what it means to be a freedom fighter, which is how I understood Jesus and his movement.
So true. So tell me, in many of your writings, you finally came to this book. So I'm really curious, why did you choose this particular topic at the moment you did?
Um, well, I was approached by an editor through my agent to write a book about evangelicalism itself, conservative evangelicalism, not political, just a book that explained what it is. And, I tried to write, I said, I'm not interested in this because I realized I was writing this book. And so, so it's not like I chose to write this book, it sort of chose me. And, when I started really looking at this subject, I was mad as hell. And so, and then I looked at the issues that right-wing evangelicals are using to fool so many people, and so I decided as a biblical scholar, because there are few of us, really dealing with politics, and certainly very few. Man, let me go subject by subject to show how wrong these rascals are, and on the terrain of their own discourse, which is the Bible. Theologians don't really deal with the Bible as much. They deal with faith and they deal with philosophy, with God thrown in. I'm sorry, but that's the way I see it. But biblical scholars get right to the heart of the history and the meaning of the text itself, and that's something that we need to do more of, to discredit. They're very backward and often vile readings of the Bible that they use to oppress and to fool and demonize people.
So let's get into to the various topics of the book. Like you said, you go topic to topic, and we're talking about Christians against Christianity, how right-wing evangelicals are destroying our nation and our faith.
You said it right.
So tell us about the book. Like what are the topics that you explore, and why?
Well, the topics I explore are the main ones that are used, that are weaponized by right-wing evangelicals. When we talk about right-wing evangelicals, we're talking about white evangelicals and, the few Negroes that straggle along behind them, like, boss, hey boss, your ice is colder, that kind of thing. So, first, one thing I deal with is abortion. These right-wing evangelicals have made it seem like abortion is the most important issue in Christendom, and almost like it's a litmus test. And I wanted to show first that the Bible does not deal with voluntary abortion at all. The only place it has humans involved in abortion is in the 21st chapter of Exodus, verse 20 through 23, which talks about when men are fighting and they injure a pregnant woman, if harms her fetus or kills her fetus and harms her, well, the fine for harming the woman is an eye for an eye, but for harming or killing the fetus is a financial fine. So the only place in the Bible that deals with abortion on a human level is it makes a distinction between walking, talking humanity and a fetus, which means that killing a fetus, I'm not suggesting anyone should do that. I'm not making a value judgment, but it's not murder according to the Bible. It's so what they're saying is just wrong. It's not a biblical issue at all. Now, people can have their own and should have their own opinions. Abortion is a very, very, very painful area, but biblically, they don't have a leg to stand on. And I must say this, the only place that there is voluntary abortion is in Numbers 5 in the Bible, in which says God will abort a woman's fetus as punishment if she's a married woman who's found to be pregnant by someone other than her husband. So the only voluntary abortion we have in the Bible is a divine abortion, which one could, if you take it all away, Al could say, well, God is saying, well, it's not wrong because I'm doing it, but I'm not going there. So anyway, so I deal with that. I deal with immigration because of how horribly they treat immigrants. And when the Bible really said, one of the the two or three most important responsibilities in the Bible is to take care of immigrants and widows and orphans. And it says it throughout the Bible. It even says that when immigrants come in, we're supposed to, we have a responsibility to take care of them until they get on their feet. It also says that they don't have to assimilate, just respect the laws. It also says that one of the reasons that tithing was prescribed was to help take care of immigrants. So I deal with that. I deal with the with the foolishness about God-given right to use guns, and I just show how the history of that's just bogus. How evangelicals are anti-working man and woman because they're anti-union. I mean, on down the line, just to show how they are against everything that the Bible is for or does not mention at all.
Yeah, and I really like the way you deconstructed all of those arguments. The one about being against the LGBTQ community and being against homosexuality.
That was a real important one to me, a real serious one for me.
Yeah, yeah, because one of the things I was always taught growing up is the whole issue of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's why it was destroyed. And you broke that down, and some other biblical passages that try to support that. And it came up in a conversation. Sodom and Gomorrah came up in a conversation this weekend with me and some girlfriends, and I was like, I wish I had the book so I could have refuted some, because I couldn't remember all the different arguments. But it's amazing how you take each one of these issues that are considered part of the right-wing evangelical movement: abortion, immigration, anti-working, against the LGBTQI plus community, and how you break each one of them down.
Yeah, and also really important, I think, is I tried this guy John MacArthur, that's supposed to be such a big time right-wing scholar. He put out a letter that social justice is anti-biblical,
right?
And 10,000 pastors, well, more than that, 10,000 plus, 11, 12,000 co-signed it. And I wanted to show that just how wrong-headed that is. Folks don't understand that social justice, and as you know, I spent a lot of time explaining that and breaking it down through translating the language that's supposed to be Hebrew the way it's supposed to be translated. Social justice is the most foundational ethic of the whole biblical tradition. It is the most important ethic, and you couple that with love your neighbor as yourself, which Jesus said is one of the two most important commandments of them all. And what do you get? You get social justice, working for social justice, working for the rights and freedom and access to the resources and goods for neighbors that we want for ourselves is our basic responsibility. And that is what I wanted to show, is that right-wing evangelicals don't get it, that the overarching ethic, if you will, of the Bible is responsibility for others in community. They're talking about liberty and freedom, and that's fine, but that's not it in the Bible, because it's not freedom from responsibility. It's freedom for responsibility. Responsibility, not freedom from responsibility. So I look to show all of those kinds of things in the book.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite. Go ahead.
Let me just say this. I've gotten a lot pushback in articles, and I've gotten, horrible emails and stuff like that, but no one has engaged me on substance. No one has contradicted me on substance yet on any of my books. Why? Because I do my research and my homework.
To me, that's Bible basic social responsibility. It's supposed to provide people with a moral compass of how to treat others. That's the way, in its basic stance, that's what the Bible teaches us. But religion is a very challenging conversation for people to have, especially with people who disagree.
Yeah.
And so how do we promote conversations in our communities so that we can argue against this right wing evangelical movement and what is and its destruction on various communities, inside communities, in our American community? How do you have those difficult conversations
Yeah.
in order to try to open people's minds, if you will?
Yeah. But first, let me say, just your previous statement. You know, the fact that we have responsibility for each other is so basic. I mean, it's basic in many communities. You know, particularly in older Black communities, because we grew up that way. But there's a real, as you know, real libertarian strain in America and in the right wing, in which they spill a lot of ink, written many books, and come up with all kinds of principles and theories say that are libertarian, that say that folk do not have responsibility for others. And like Robert Nozick, what's his book, Anarchy and something else, I forgot the title. And so I had to take time to address them on that level too, you know, because other than that, it could have just said, duh, it's basic. You know, we have to look out for each other. But that's the kind of legwork that I had to do. See, I wrote this book as a resource for folk to use to argue against the fallacious assumptions and arguments of the right wing. In terms of how do we engender conversation, and you're talking about between both sides, right?
Yes.
I think if we're talking in the faith community, one thing we have to do is first basics like chapter and verse. You know, we have to go to the text that we claim, you know, to hold in common. And an example is love your neighbor as yourself. You know, that is. Has such profound implications socially, economically, politically. I have to take time to unpack it and engage each other on the basis of, you know, on the basis of the basics, right? And so it has to be an ethical conversation based on ethics, I think, rather than doctrines, because, you know, that's all kinds of other stuff. So that's why, you know, rather than John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that's not the core of the gospel. Love your neighbor as yourself is the core of the gospel. Egalitarian political freedom, egalitarian justice is what that stands for. By the way, justice, as I point out in the book, is the most often used term in the Bible, and that reflects how basic it is to the biblical witness. But also, as you know, in the book, I offer what Jesus said in Matthew 25:31-46, that about which is really the primary mode of judgment that Jesus gives us, that God will use for us, that we should use for ourselves and others by extension. And that's the passage where he says, you know, as you have not done it for the least of these, you have not done it for me. And for those who aren't familiar with the passage, Matthew 25, verses 31-46. When you go back and read it, you'll notice that what Jesus says doesn't say here is that God will judge us by who we love, who we marry, you know, who we're intimate with. He doesn't talk about what we believe. It all comes down to how we act. How we, if you're trying to be just toward other people, then you go to eternal life, the passage says. If you don't do that, then you go to hell. That's what the passage says. So I'm saying that if we go back to the basics, and that we claim to hold in common, and on an ethical level, that gives us more of a basis for discussion and conversation and dialogue, in my opinion.
So, just speaking about ethics, do you think there are ethics in the right wing evangelical movement, or are their ethics just different?
Yeah, their ethics are different. Their ethics, what they value is different. Look, that right wing evangelical movement, have you ever heard any of them use the word love or
Mm,
justice at all? They don't.
mm,
Those are not significant to them. What they also don't realize is that Jesus said almost nothing about what folks should believe. It's always about how we should live and treat each other. Well, they're always talking about, doctrines and stuff like that Jesus didn't even write. That's why I say we have to get back to basics. And as far as their ethics, justice is the most often used ethic in the Bible. Well, they don't use justice. So in that way, they're not biblical. In fact, they're anti-biblical because the kinds of policies they talk about are unjust. It's unjust the way they treat immigrants and gay people, right? So they have ethics, but they're not biblical ethics. They're screwed up and they're anti-Christian at their core, and that's what's so sad, because so many of them think that they're doing the right thing. Not all of them are ugly and evil, and so we have a responsibility to show them the difference. That's what a responsibility I have as a biblical scholar.
So, what do you think people can learn by reading your book?
Well, I think they can learn a couple things. One thing they'll learn real quickly is that right-wing evangelical movement is, and I don't say this lightly, is essentially an anti-Christian movement because it militates against the very basics of the gospel. Militates against love, militates against having responsibility for others, militates against justice. It doesn't talk about life as much as it talks about death and war and all that. It's not concerned about the least of these, which is human beings walking the earth. They're obsessed, with zygotes and fetuses. And when that fetus is born, becomes a human being, if it lives till term, they got no use for it. So they learn that. They also learn what biblical Christianity really is. I think I take time to show that in every regard. If someone else wrote this book, I'd say the same thing that I'm going to say now, which is what the people who endorsed the book have said, that it is an important book in that it fills a gap in the knowledge of everyday people of what Christianity is, how we should practice it, and why we must resist this evil scourge of right-wing evangelicalism that is tearing this country apart.
So, as a scholar, when we choose what we want to write, we have a purpose behind that choice, right? And
Right.
so, in writing this book, Christians Against Christianity, what do you hope to accomplish as a scholar?
I hope to take one more step in fulfilling my responsibility to humanity and to Black Christian believers in particular, but to all in general. My main responsibility is to be a struggler for freedom and justice in society. Not to build the church up, not to tear the church down. It's beyond that. And none of us should have our primary responsibility to any religious institution at all. It should be to the welfare of the people. Jesus didn't stand up for any institution, just the opposite. The institution turned against him because he wasn't Because as my grandmother said, because he wasn't studying.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I am. That's what I'd like people to get out of the book, and that's why what I hope to get out of having written it.
I know you are a big advocate for higher education, as I am. And one of the things I always like to do is to provide students strategies for college success. So could you tell us what school or schools did you attend? What were your major or majors? And what were your degree or degrees? And then what strategy would you give students to ensure that they're successful in college?
Okay, well, first I'll say something that I was fortunate because I graduated in the bottom half of my class messing around, even though I was vice president, student council, and president of the Black Student Union, but I was messing around. I got into college on a humble. I'm not proud of it at all. Ended up flunking out, still acting a fool. I eventually went back, was able to get back into Rutgers because I knew someone there. My first child was born, so I worked like hell. And from then I became a serious student. So the first thing is students, you got to realize this is serious business. This is your life. And I don't know anyone who is as lucky as I've been, though I'm sure there's some. But anyway, I went back, graduated from Rutgers. I was very fortunate. And then I went to Wall Street. I did some time at Rutgers Graduate School of Business, doing an MBA. I did not finish. Years later, though, I went to Princeton Theological Seminary, and I excelled there. Why did I excel there? Because I was serious about it. And I'll tell you what you students should do. It's important. You don't have to study all the time, but be disciplined. I would get up and I'd study from 6 o'clock in the morning till about 8 or 9, and then maybe a couple hours later in the day, but that was it. And I'm talking about I was taking different languages, Greek, Hebrew, and all that, and taking all my other courses. Then I graduated from Princeton Theological Seminary with honors, and I was accepted into the religion department at the Princeton University. And what I learned there is that, I thought, being a PhD program at an Ivy League institution, you had to be a genius. Well, no, you don't. And what you have to do is work hard and be clear on what it is that your interest is in and where your gifts are, right? And those two have to go together. So I guess what I would say early on, spend some time. And let me say this: when I was 21, I asked myself, if I could do anything in life, what would that be? And I came up with, I'd like to be a professor of religion or philosophy. And I said, oh no.
You knew at 21. You knew at 21.
Yeah, I said, you have to have at least a master's degree. And I said, no, I haven't even finished college. I barely finished high school. No. Take that time. It might take you some weeks or months, but take time to get clear on what really interests you, what you'd really like to do, no matter what it is. Even if it is to go to trade school and be a master mechanic, be clear on what you like, what you like to do and what you have an aptitude for, and then follow that and be diligent about it and take it seriously, right? Don't be cowed by it. Don't be intimidated. Just work hard every day, diligently, and you will succeed. That's all there is to it. And then when you got it, no one can take it away from you. I got to tell you, I was in an airport once, and I was president of a college when I was in my early 40s, and I had no gray hair or anything. I was so this older white man, and we were in an airport, and he said something about young fella. Well, I could say to him, no, I'm not just a young fellow. I'm an Ivy League PhD and president of a college. You step back and they can't take it away from you, whatever it is. I'm a master mechanic, man. I'm not just some young fella. I'm an electrician who makes more than a whole lot of white collar executives. I'm not just some young person. Take pride in it and work hard at it, and you'll be successful.
Love that advice, Dr. Hendricks. Know that college is serious business, so take it seriously. Be
Yeah.
disciplined in your study. Work hard. Take time to get clear. And then be diligent and serious once you decide what you want to do and be. Thank you so much for those strategies. I'm sure it's going to help some students. Thank you, and students.
Thank you for this time. I've enjoyed it, and I really appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you.
A special thank you to the incredible team of the Empowerment Zone. Terry Gully, theme song. NADWorks, digital support, and of course, our featured guest.